case you're wondering why I'm in a swimming pool, it's because that's what I'm going to be talking about. Swimming pools, or people's reflections and reminiscences about swimming pools. I'm Stella. This is my channel, 30 Books, where I predominantly talk about Australian books and Australian writing to get you to go out and buy, not beg, not steal, or borrow an Australian book. Now, we are in February here in Australia. We have had, especially in Victoria, rather glorious summer. It's either blazing hot or just no summer at all. So we had a few really hot, humid days. It's like Queensland moved down here. But overall, it's been rather gorgeous. No bushfires in Victoria, not so lucky in Western Australia. So there's been a lot of beach time, and I wanted to talk about, a summer book on my channel. And when you think about Australian and summer, it's generally the beach. It's not, the dry bush. Everyone's heading to the coast and they're going to get dumped by waves and stung by blue bottles, and people are going to reminisce about being chased by sharks, that type of thing. But a lot of us, especially if we grew up in the suburbs, spent our time in backyard swimming pools, not our own or the neighbours, or getting dropped off at the local pool at 10 in the morning and picked up at 4 in the afternoon, sometimes 6 o'clock at night, by your parents, and being sunburned, red eyes from the chlorine. I had really white hair when I was a kid, and it used to go green from chlorine. So my book this time around is called The Memory Pool. Edited, it's an anthology, and it's edited by Therese Bruin. The Memory Pool, Australian Stories of Summer, Sun and Swimming. Now, it's a couple of years old, I will say that, and it's about, I think there's around about 30 stories, and they're all written by well-known Australians, but they're not famous Australians. A number are now quite well known. Trenton Dalton, Leah Purcell, she's a screenwriter and actor. Brian Brown is an actor and now he's writing. There are a number of writers within here, but often writing is not their first profession. So, there's a former former Tasmanian Premier in there. We've got public servants. There are Olympians and Paralympians, and they're often people well known within their community. So there's a woman in here, and she writes about how her grandfather built a swimming pool for the community out of a dam on his property called Fonties. And it's built in a timber town in southwest WA called Manchamuck, tiny little town. So back in the day, it would have been absolutely tiny. And it just, it's famous, this pool. And it was a place that was totally embraced by the community. There's also one called Mettons Pool, which is in Trigg Beach in WA. Look, I'm not just talking about WA the whole time, but it's really interesting that, Trigg Beach was often inaccessible, and Metten, I think this was his surname, he kind of it became his project, and he blew the rocks up so he could create this swimming place, but not just a swimming place. And then sort of aquatic life went into the pool as well. Lots of kids learned how to swim there. So it's these beautiful reflections. And the stories are broken up. So for example, they're broken up into urban pools, bay pools, sea pools. There's not enough sea pools in Australia. There's a lot in New South Wales, it seems, but very few anywhere else, especially in Victoria. Building pools, which I talked about. Kim Metten talked about Metten's Pool. historic pools. So there's one where the community galvanised to save the Fitzroy pool. That's the other thing that I loved about this anthology. It's like how egalitarian swimming pools are, and they just seem like the swimming pool, but it's really it's where the community is. It's a great leveller. We think the beach is a great leveller. Well, the pool is even more so. My favourite section though was champions of the pool. So Priya Cooper, who is a Paralympian swimmer, Shane Gould, I mean, what an amazing story, and I'm going to talk about her in a minute. Laurie Lawrence, who became, really well, he's a famous Australian swimming coach in Australia. What I particularly liked Shane Gould's, so Shane Gould was an absolute champion in the swimming pool, and she went to the Olympics, I think it was the Munich Olympics, when she was 13 years old, and she retired when she was 16. She is in her late 50s, she could be in her 60s, but the way she talks about her training schedule and the feeling that she had when she was training at the age of 12 is so crystal clear, and the way she writes about the detail in it is quite amazing. It's like she was training yesterday, and and all of these swimmers, they certainly didn't come from rich families, so they weren't, training in their own backyard Olympic pool. Shane Gould sounded like she was training in a pool in an aluminium shed, and often like they were, cheek by jowl or foot by arm, and brushing up next to the swimmer that's going past that way. I also particularly love these stories because they're so opposite to my experience of swimming pools. Like mine was all about doing bombies and, just later on meeting boys and just mucking around in the pool. I knew how to swim, but I wasn't doing any type of competitions. So that's the thing about writing, you can enter into someone else's world, and I just loved it. And I'm going to read a little bit of her. It's very crowded and the water could get pretty turbulent. There'd be 8, 10, sometimes 12 people in a lane in a 25-metre pool. So you had to be really careful when you were passing each other, be really aware of space and tuck your arm in so it didn't get whacked by a big strong guy. The lane ropes were just corks on a rope, and sometimes the water was horribly smelly when they didn't get the chemical balance right and the chlorine stung your eyes. It was before we wore goggles all the time, so we were always using Murine, which is an eye drop, and your skin got really dry, especially scaly calves. I was really in my body when I was training. I was very physically aware of my structures, my capacities, and the pleasure I could get from my body moving and exerting itself. I loved the deep breathing and those really strong exhales, my lungs expanding to their capacity and the strains of my muscles, and then getting to the end and stopping to rest and recover within 20, 30, 40 seconds. And be back to normal breathing again. I loved pushing myself as hard as I could till I was gasping for air, feeling the strain on my muscles, especially my shoulders. At the time, we had nylon suits because Lycra wasn't invented till 1973. I remember putting my hands on my waist and feeling my hip bones and the flatness of my stomach, but also the curve of my waist, like an awakening of my femaleness. How fantastic to really feel like a female and just feel this strength at such a young age. The Memory Pool, Australian Stories of Summer, Sun and Swimming, edited by Therese Buren, and it is out by New South Publishing, and that's all I've got time for today. Let me know what you think in the comments. When was the last time you read an anthology of essays? Is this the type of videos you like? What would you like to hear more of? Love to hear your suggestions, and I'll see you next time on 30 Books.